getting the ambulance, getting to the hospital. Luckily, I had a great surgeon and I had so much pain medication at that point. I was kind of out of it.
Simon Cowell has spent nearly 3 decades being the toughest voice in the room. The man who could end a dream with 2 words and make a nation gasp. But behind that sharp tongue and those trademark high-waisted trousers is a body that has been through more than most fans realize, and a mind that carried pain nobody saw on camera. From a bike accident that nearly left him paralyzed to a private battle with depression, he hid for years behind a confident smirk. Simon's real story is far more painful than any judging panel insult he's ever delivered. And now, at 66, he's stepping away from the desk once again. Stick around, because this one hits closer to home than you'd expect. The crash that changed everything. It was supposed to be a fun afternoon. August 8, 2020, Simon Cowell was at his Malibu home with his partner Lauren Silverman, their son Eric, and Lauren's son Adam, trying out a brand new electric bike he'd shipped over from England. He couldn't wait to ride it. Can you imagine the excitement of a grown man getting a new toy, gathering the family in the courtyard, ready to show off a little? That excitement turned into one of the scariest moments of his life in a matter of seconds. Simon pulled the throttle, and the bike reared up into what he later described as the biggest wheelie he'd ever felt. He was thrown several feet into the air and landed directly on his back. He recalled the full sequence years later on the Elizabeth Day podcast, How to Fail, explaining that he knew instantly something was seriously wrong the moment he hit the ground. That's the kind of memory that doesn't fade, the split second where your whole life could have gone a completely different direction. His representatives confirmed the fall in a statement issued that same day, and Deadline reported at the time that Simon had broken his back in the courtyard of his Malibu home and would be undergoing surgery that very evening. Doctors later told him just how close the accident came to leaving him unable to walk. Speaking to Extra in 2021, Simon admitted that when he saw the X-ray, he realized he had nearly smashed his spine to pieces. That's not the kind of thing you shake off. That's the kind of thing that stays with you every single time you sit down, stand up, or even laugh too hard. What's wild is what he did in those first few minutes after the fall. He wasn't supposed to move at all, but somehow, in shock and adrenaline, he carried himself back toward the house before collapsing. He described lying there, drifting in and out of consciousness, calling the whole thing surreal. Most people would panic completely. Simon just went quiet and held on, and that quiet resilience is something people close to him still bring up years later. The surgery that followed lasted several hours, and surgeons inserted a metal rod along with a number of screws to stabilize his spine, a procedure that outlets covering the accident described in detail at the time. Recovery wasn't quick. It took months of rehabilitation, physical therapy, and a level of patience that the notoriously blunt television judge admitted didn't come naturally to him. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of slowing him down permanently, that accident became a turning point. Before the crash, Simon openly admits he wasn't in great shape. In one candid Fox News interview, he confessed that he didn't realize just how unfit he truly was until he was forced to rebuild his body from scratch after the accident. He said things like that happen for a reason, and however painful the lesson, he used it to completely transform his lifestyle. That's a pretty remarkable mindset for a man who nearly couldn't walk. Instead of resenting the accident, he turned it into motivation. But, as you're about to see, one accident wasn't the end of his story with bikes, or with his back. And it's worth remembering just how much was riding on that recovery in the first place. Simon wasn't just a private citizen nursing an injury quietly at home. He was, and still is, the executive producer behind America's Got Talent, a show that airs live to millions of viewers every single week during its season. Missing that first season entirely wasn't a small inconvenience. It was a genuine disruption to one of the biggest competition franchises on American television, and it forced the show's producers to figure out how to keep things running without their most recognizable face behind the judge's desk. Now, Before we get into just how much this one injury reshaped his daily life and why it's still making headlines in 2026, let's talk about what happened in the years right after the surgery, because the recovery road was anything but smooth. Life with metal rods and screws. You'd think after a lengthy spinal surgery, anyone would swear off two-wheeled vehicles for life. Not Simon. He's been open about being genuinely obsessed with bikes, telling reporters he had no intention of giving them up despite everything he went through. That kind of stubbornness is honestly very on-brand for him. The same stubborn streak that's made him one of the most recognizable judges on television for over 20 years. But that stubbornness came with a price. In early 2022, just over a year after the first accident, Simon was involved in a second e-bike incident, this time near his home in London. This one didn't require surgery, but it did leave him with a broken arm. He later joked that he was lucky, since he'd nearly torn a ligament completely. 2 serious bike accidents within 18 months would be enough to make most people reconsider their hobbies entirely. Yet, Simon kept going, cast and all, back onto the America's Got Talent judging panel that same season. The long-term effects of that first crash didn't disappear once the cast came off or the stitches healed. TV Insider laid out how Simon has spoken candidly about dealing with lasting nerve damage from the original spinal injury, admitting the accident was far more serious than the public understood at the time. He kept a lot of the pain to himself in those early years, choosing to push through filming schedules rather than let the world see how much he was struggling behind the scenes. There's also the migraines. Bright television lights, especially during long filming days for America's Got Talent, have triggered painful headaches for Simon for years. He's talked about needing to wear red-tinted glasses on set, specifically to reduce the strain from the intense studio lighting. A detail he shared in an Instagram post, explaining why fans started noticing the accessory during tapings. Sources close to him have said the migraines are directly connected to those bright filming lights, and that the glasses genuinely help him get through a full day of shooting without being in constant discomfort. Here's the thing about chronic pain, though. It doesn't show up in a highlight reel. Fans watching Simon deliver a sharp critique or press the golden buzzer have no idea that underneath the tailored suit is a spine held together with hardware, nerves that still ache years after the initial injury, and a body that's been rebuilt through sheer discipline. Gulf News reported that Simon made a promise to himself after the crash that he'd come out fitter than before, and by most accounts, he kept that promise, sticking to a strict diet and exercise routine credited with managing the lingering effects of the accident. On top of the physical toll from the accidents, Simon also had to deal with a bout of COVID-19 in February 2022, right in the middle of everything else his body was managing. He's spoken about how frightening that period was, not just for himself, but for his young son and his fiancée, since the pandemic had already claimed the health of people close to him. Layer that on top of a fresh cast on his arm and lingering nerve pain from the spinal surgery, and you start to get a fuller picture of just how much Simon was quietly juggling behind that judge's desk during those years, all while still delivering the same sharp commentary fans expected every single week. And just when it seemed like the back injury was finally becoming a distant memory, 2026 brought a reminder that some wounds take even longer to fully heal than anyone expects. But before we get to that, there's another side of Simon's health story that fans rarely talk about, one that has nothing to do with bikes or broken bones at all. Behind the confidence, a battle with depression. For a man whose entire public persona was built on brutal honesty and unshakable confidence, Simon Cowell spent decades hiding something much harder to talk about than a broken back. Depression, not the kind that comes and goes with a bad week, but the kind that quietly follows you through some of the biggest triumphs of your career. It started young, in a way. Simon's father, Eric Cowell, died of a heart attack in 1999, and the timing was almost unbearably cruel. Gulf News detailed how Simon learned the devastating news on the very same day he was celebrating his first #1 hit as a music executive with the Irish boy band Westlife, and he later broke down, recalling the moment on Piers Morgan's Life Stories. He described how his mother had to deliver the news over a transatlantic phone call and how he simply fell apart the moment he heard it. Then in 2015, Simon lost his mother, Julie, a former ballet dancer and well-known socialite, just one day before he was set to appear on The X Factor for the opening audition rounds. He's described that period as the hardest of his entire life, explaining in an interview that it represented a kind of total finality, since both of his parents were now gone. And in true Simon Cowell fashion, he didn't take time off. He was back filming within days, putting on a composed face for the cameras while privately falling apart behind the scenes. For years, Simon dismissed his depression as simply part of his personality, something he had to just deal with quietly rather than something worth addressing. That changed with an event nobody saw coming, the COVID-19 pandemic. AOL reported that watching friends fall seriously ill and fearing for the safety of his own family became what he's called the real catalyst that finally pushed him toward professional therapy. He began attending regular sessions and has spoken about how unraveling years of internalized pressure, especially his obsession with television ratings, completely changed how he saw himself. In one particularly candid podcast appearance, Simon admitted he felt like he was dying inside during his darkest periods, forcing himself to perform and smile for cameras while privately spiraling. National World covered how he said he wished he had started therapy 10 or 20 years earlier, describing the relief of finally talking about his struggles as feeling like a weight lifting off his shoulders. That's a profound admission from a man who built an entire career on never showing weakness in front of an audience. Through all of it, his son Eric, born in 2014, became an unexpected source of healing. Simon has said that becoming a father in his 50s fundamentally changed him, giving him a reason to step back from the workaholic tendencies that once consumed him entirely. He's credited Eric with helping him process the grief of losing both parents, saying that without his son, he genuinely doesn't know what might have happened to him during those darkest years. It's a side of Simon Cowell that took decades to surface publicly, the vulnerable man underneath the sharp critiques and record deals. What's especially striking is how much of his career was built on projecting the exact opposite image. For years, being seen as the unbothered, unshakable judge who could deliver devastating feedback without flinching was practically his brand identity. The persona that made him famous on Pop Idol, then The X Factor, and eventually American Idol. Knowing now what he was privately carrying during those years adds a completely different layer to every single one of those blunt, headline-making critiques. And just when fans thought they'd heard the full picture of what he'd been through physically and emotionally, this past week brought fresh headlines that tie both of those threads together once again. Stepping away again in 2026. Fast forward to August 2026, and Simon Cowell is once again out of the spotlight, this time voluntarily, and for good reason. TMZ reported that Simon is scheduled to undergo a routine procedure connected to his long-standing back issues, a surgery that will force him to miss several weeks of America's Got Talent, while filming continues on the current season. Sources close to the production described the situation as unrelated to any new major health emergency, just a continuation of the ongoing care his back has required since that 2020 accident. Multiple outlets picked up the story within hours, and Yahoo Entertainment confirmed the same core details, noting that this latest procedure is tied directly to the original spinal injury rather than any sudden new diagnosis. It's a reminder that recovering from a broken back isn't always a straight line. Sometimes, years later, the body needs another round of attention to keep functioning properly, especially when metal hardware has been holding things together since 2020. It's currently unclear who, if anyone, will temporarily fill in for Simon on the judging panel during his weeks away, and NBC has yet to confirm exactly when he's expected to return to the desk. What is clear is that Simon has anchored America's Got Talent as a judge since 2016, building on a television legacy that stretches back even further. from Pop Idol and The X Factor in the United Kingdom to American Idol here in the United States. Across all of those shows, he's become one of the most influential and recognizable talent judges in television history. What makes this latest chapter land differently than his earlier health scares is the context surrounding it. This isn't a shocking new diagnosis. It's a man in his 60s, still carrying the physical consequences of an accident from 6 years ago, choosing to prioritize his health and take the time his body needs rather than pushing through in silence the way he might have done earlier in his career. Given everything Simon has shared about that original crash, the nerve damage, the years of quiet pain behind the cameras, and the migraines from studio lighting, this latest procedure reads less like a crisis and more like ongoing maintenance on an injury that changed his life forever. It also says something about how far Simon has come emotionally. The same man who once hid his depression for decades and pushed through his mother's death by going straight back to filming is now openly stepping back, letting the public know exactly why he's taking time off and trusting his team to handle the show in his absence. That kind of transparency simply wasn't part of his story a decade ago, and it says a lot about the personal growth that's happened quietly behind all those seasons of television. His willingness to talk about therapy, grief, chronic pain, and now another surgery, all while still sitting behind that judging desk week after week, has slowly reshaped how the public sees him. He's no longer just the man handing out brutal one-liners to nervous contestants. He's a survivor of a genuinely life-threatening accident, a father who credits his son with saving him from his own darkest thoughts. And now, once again, a patient trusting doctors to help him keep doing the job he's built his entire identity around. There's also something worth appreciating about the timing of it all. Simon has built his entire empire around discovering talent, from launching the careers of major pop acts through his record labels to turning unknown singers and dance groups into household names on stage after stage, season after season. Stepping away now, even briefly, means trusting a production he built from the ground up to carry on without him at the center of it, something the old, guarded version of Simon might have struggled to do a decade ago. Instead, he's choosing rest, choosing recovery, and choosing to let the people around him step up, which is its own kind of quiet strength, one that doesn't get nearly the same headlines as a broken back or a bold on-air critique, but arguably matters just as much. It's also a strange kind of full-circle moment when you think about it. The man who spent years telling contestants they weren't good enough, that they needed to work harder, that talent alone wasn't enough without discipline, is now the one being told by his own doctors to slow down and let his body do the work of healing. There's a certain humility in that, in going from the person handing out tough love on stage to the person who has to receive it from a surgeon's office instead. So while the headlines might sound alarming at first glance, the reality is a little more grounded, and honestly, a little more human. Simon Cowell isn't disappearing. He's healing, again, the same way he has been quietly doing since that August afternoon back in 2020, when one electric bike changed the course of his entire life. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.